that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney, or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it, Legends. Today, I have for you Book 4 in the new Jedi Order series, the first of a duology by James Luceno, which is Agents of Chaos 1... Jedi Trial. Or Hero's Trial, sorry. Jedi Trial is a Clone Wars novel. My bad. So this is another duology. We're going to have this duology by James Luceno, then we'll have one book that's just written by one author, and then we'll have another duology. There's a lot of duologies in this series. This one is Han-centric. This one, you know, Han's been sulking for the past 3 books. He's been grieving. He was doing a lot of stuff in Vector Prime, but then he's been grieving ever since. For, the last 2 books, he's just been grieving. He's not played a role, really, in the universe. That may not seem like a lot of time, but when you're reading a novel, it feels like it's been a while since you've seen Han doing things. But here, he finally gets back in action, and starts doing stuff. He's not necessarily over his grief yet. I don't know if anybody ever really gets over their grief, but he hasn't really moved beyond it yet. He's still, this duology is kind of him getting through that. But one thing you notice immediately, this is written by James Luceno, this is a lot more lighthearted than the other novels have been so far. James Luceno, for those of you who don't know, was a big, huge friend to Brian Daley, who wrote the 80s Han Solo trilogy, which was just a bunch of, one-off adventures with Han Solo. There was, At Star's End, and 2 others, I'm forgetting the name of them right now, Han Solo's Revenge, and I forget what the other one was called, but that one involved Treasures of Zim the Despot. But, that's what Brian Daley brought to the table. Along with also working on a couple audio dramas and stuff and whatnot. But because of that, there's a lot of references, because James Luceno is the master of connections and saying stuff. He loves to just throw things in there. It doesn't need to be there, but he'll throw it in there so a connection is made, which is really cool. So there's a lot of Brian Daley stuff in here, like Roa, who is a character from Brian Daley stuff, is here, and it's one of the big motivating factors for Han doing what he does in this book. And he meets a new character named Jeroma. Jeroma is this witty, bantery sort of guy that just, connects like that with Han Solo. And it's a thing of, you're not a replacement, you know that, right? You're not Chewie. It's kind of what Han's thinking in his head. Jeroma's not trying to replace anybody, he's just here. But that's, kind of what Han is a little bit of feeling like betraying Chewbacca by having this guy around because they're vibing so well. So there's that. We also have other stuff going on. What I've noticed, which I don't know if I really noticed the first time, the first book in the New Jedi Order, we mainly got to see the scouting party, and we got to see Nominor, who's the politician. He is the Palpatine. Minus the fact that he's not all-powerful. There kind of is a different guy that's kind of doing the same thing, but that's spoilers for way down the line. But there is technically a Palpatine who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. But as far as that role's mainly given to in this book series, he may not be the all-powerful Sith Lord, but he is this conniving, smart, tactical, always trying to one-up and get higher up on the totem pole. Nominor is that guy, and the politicians were the villains, really, in that first book. In the duology by Stackpole, we had we had the military force, more of that as a focus. Especially with Shadow Shy, he was kind of like the equivalent to Thrawn in this time period, which is kind of what they were going for. He even learned about Thrawn through Elegos. And here we get that third aspect. We get the religious aspect of this, because then we meet characters named Harar. And Harar is like more of this religious dude. Now, Shadow Shy was also extremely religious and believed in the religion of the Yusung Vong. Most of them do. But he was definitely more of the military mind, whereas Harar is more of a devout religious priest dude. With the help of Nominor, they come up with this concoction to have Elan, this new character, this, I believe, first female Vong we've seen, pretend to defect from the Yusung Vong and to meet the Jedi and introduce to them this toxic thing, which is also like bugs because they use living things. But it's basically, imagine that the first Dune novel where Leto has that little thing in his tooth that goes, could kill the Baron. That's essentially what we're going for here. And Han and Droma end up meeting up with her, and things happen and get resolved. But another important piece to the puzzle here, which is the most controversial thing in all of Star Wars, because it all goes back to Traitor, baby, with the whole rest of the franchise all hinges on how people feel about that damn book. But we get introduced to a very important character for this series, and for Jacen Solo specifically, even though she's not really relevant to Jacen Solo's story at the moment. In fact, Jacen Solo isn't even really a big part of this, because Han Solo's been out of it for so long, we're mainly focusing on our boy. But we get introduced to Verge, who's this bird-like, think Dark Crystal. If it was in live action, it would look like Dark Crystal with those like bird things. And she's this familiar. She's this pet of Elan, this Vong, right? And then, the mystery begins. Of course, if you know her, you already know her. But what is she? Because it doesn't seem like she came from the Vong Galaxy. Not at all. In fact, there's a moment where Han mentions Luke Skywalker, and he notices that Verge's eyes lit up at the name Skywalker. Though, if you've been reading in chronological order, then you already know the truth, which is that Verge, especially for Rogue Planet, was a former Jedi of the Old Republic. No matter what people tend to disagree on with her character, whatever on moving forward, the absolute facts that we know of is that she was a Jedi of the Old Republic. And that at some point, she disappeared during the time of the prequels. In fact, Obi-Wan and Anakin even go on a mission to find her after the events of Outbound Flight. Or before, sorry. And they don't find her. And we haven't heard, Verge was never this big, important Jedi like Dooku or anything. She was just an average, if you're watching a Versus video, she'd be like a C-tier list of a Jedi in terms of her strength and what she actually did in the wider universe, which is basically nothing. But she disappeared, no one heard from her, and now here she is. After 20 years, since the time of, before the Clone Wars even, so 30 years actually. 40 years actually at this point. Somewhere along that time. It's been a long time since the prequels at this point. And now, she's back. Is she a good guy? Is she a bad guy? What is her wants? What is her desires? We don't really know. All we know is that by the time this book ends, she thanks Han for being able to return to her people. And the only reason they begin to suspect that she even came from this galaxy is because Droma claims to have seen one of her races when he was doing one of his random missions back in the day. So she comes from our galaxy. But I won't get too much into Verge. There's more stuff to talk about, mainly in Traitor. But she's one of the best female characters in all fiction. She's very mysterious, very interesting to talk about. Not really here, though. There's a lot of teasing and setup with her, but we don't actually get that much with her here. And anything further I want to say about her, I'll say for spoilers. But she's a very integral character, a very important character for the series, and nothing I can really go on about without spoilers. So I will move on from that. This book was a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun moments between Han and Droma. I will say, this is the first book that I felt like the momentum kind of dipped. Because another thing they introduced is the Peace Brigade, which is, well, humans, civilians, they're getting scared. They're getting scared of the Vong. And they'd rather, and smugglers, they just want to get their pay, right? So they want to help the Vong so they can escape death. They think, if we help the Vong will leave us alone, So now you have humans and other species that simply don't want to be massacred by the Vong, helping out the Vong. So causing another problem for all the heroes to have to face. On top of the Vong and everything going on there, they ought to also deal with just normal, everyday aliens and humans attacking them. So that's mainly what's going on in this book. It's definitely not one of my favorites of Luceno. I might even actually prefer Millennium Falcon and Cloak of Deception, some of his weaker books over this one. I'll be honest. It's fun, it's good, but it's not the best that New Jedi Order has to offer. I like Stackpole's Duology far more than I've enjoyed this book as a whole. This book is also longer. It wasn't bad. I want to stress that. It's not. I don't know. I appreciate James Luceno's connections that he makes, the humor that he has between Droma and Han, all the other little things that we have there with him and Anakin and stuff like that. That was good. They sort of kind of reconcile. He still doesn't exactly apologize for blaming Anakin for Chewie's death, but he's at least on friendlier terms with his son, which is good, even though he never formally apologizes for that, really. He kind of does in this book, but not exactly. I would have liked to hear, "I'm sorry for blaming you, it is not your fault," which is not what he explicitly said, but whatever there. And then, of course, there's straining relationships between Han and Leia. The difference is I know this will be resolved because this is the EU, where they stick together no matter what, because they love each other. Even after family members die, no matter what, they stick together. Unlike another thing that I know about, but we won't address that here. But for now, their relationship is a bit strained because by the end of this book, Droma's family is missing and he feels like he owes Droma. He's going to find Droma's family. Before he can get back to his family and helping them against the Vong, he feels obligated to complete this task. This is his life debt, but he has to finish this. It's not for life. I have a debt, I need to repay it, and then I can go. But until I pay off that debt, I'm focusing on this. Plus Roa. Roa's an old friend. I already lost one friend. I gotta do this. I have an obligation to. And that's just where Han's at. So overall, it was a really fun book. Not the best in New Jedi Order, but not the worst by any means. That falls to the trilogy down the line. Blech. The Force Heretic trilogy is a mixed bag. And I'm not looking forward to rereading it. But we'll see when we get there. But yeah, I don't want to talk about anything else without getting into spoilers. Nominor's in this book more than he was in any other book, so it's exciting to see him. I don't remember what I thought of Nominor the first time through, before getting to certain books, but now that I know who he is and what he's all about, it's fun rereading these sections, knowing who he is as a person, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable that way. We also get mentions of Tezvong Law, which will be a very important character moving forward as well. We'll get more into him in other books. But yes, a lot of things are being introduced here that will matter later on, and a lot of other fun things are being addressed. There's a lot of connections made, but I'll save that for if you read it. And if you have read it, then you already know what I'm talking about. But it's James Luceno, so of course it's not going to be a bad novel by any means. Just not my favorite of New Jedi Order, personally. But anyway, guys, that's it for non-spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, now's your time to go. I guess I slightly spoiled some things, but nothing that would ruin the book for you. If you don't want spoilers, now's your time to dip. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. This is a short time after the last novel by Stackpole, because we're still at a 6-month gap at the time of this, so... Alon and Verget have a very interesting relationship, and I'm interested to see certain things with Verget a second time through, but Verget is intentionally so a very mysterious character. but she also seems to have a genuine affection for Elaine. At the same time, near the end of this book, she didn't seem that choked up about her dying either. So it's a very interesting thing going on there with that. We also get our first mention of Cal Omos, which is very important, because Cal Omos will be an important figure later on in NJO alone and moving forward. They go to have a funeral for Chewbacca at Kashyyyk. And Chewbacca's son and Lobaka say that they're willing to carry on the life debt that Chewie owes Han. And Han starts losing it. He says, no. And they're like, that would be really disrespectful if you don't accept us. And he's like, he doesn't want to worry about another death on his hands. He doesn't want that. So he says, no, I at least not right now. I can't do this. No, I'm not ready. I can't have another. I can't do this. Now, I'm just going to say now because I'm in the spoiler section anyway. The missed opportunities from this book series, and this may be up to Denning or whatever, but it's not even Denning. You can't put it on him because the later books just of NJO don't include them. So, at least in the capacity that it's setting up here, neither Lobaka nor Chewie's son ever become like the new Chewbacca for Han. And then again, even if they skip out on that, we had Jeroma, who they even joke about, like, you're not replacing him. You know, almost as if he's going to actually be, not a replacement, but he's going to be a new person that Han can get along with moving forward that can help them out. That can actually speak. Instead of, Chewbacca just going, right? But after this duology, I mean, he'll show up again, Jeroma, but he's not going to be like Chewie's new best buddy. Like, it just doesn't happen. And those are some missed opportunities that I just don't like, that just aren't used. And that's also James Luceno's fault. Can't put this on Denning or anyone else because, he wrote the last book in New Jedi Order, Unifying Force, and he doesn't even set it up that they'll be hanging out together. So, why even do this whole, plot? I mean, I like the plot of, getting Han back on his feet and everything, but I really like Droma, and they just decide not to keep him around. They could have found a way to make it work. Maybe not forever, but at least for all of NGO, and that's not what happens. So it's but it is what it is. Han dips on his family. He just kind of up and leaves. And, his relationship with Anakin still isn't the best. Anakin tries to make amends with him. Han awkwardly accepts his gift, which ends up saving him by the end of the novel. But he doesn't exactly apologize or anything. He gives his son an awkward hug and leaves. Han and Anakin have a weird sort of relationship right now, because even by the end of the book, he does sort of apologize, but he doesn't do it exactly either. He never formally goes, this isn't your fault. So no matter how much better the relationship gets over this, I feel like Anakin still feels the burden of this is my fault and I need to fix it. Or I need to prove myself over and over. Kind of like Kip does every single day of his life. I have a burning desire to atone for my sins. Even though, unlike Kip, and I love Kip, and I'm saying this, Anakin did nothing wrong. But he still holds that burden. But yeah, Han meets Roa again and gets introduced to Droma, and Droma and Han just have the best chemistry. James Luceno did a phenomenal job with these two. They really seem like two peas in a pod. They get along swell, and it was a joy to listen to their conversations a lot of the time. It was just a lot of fun. Another thing we learn we get to see Belinda Kalinda. Do you remember her? She's from the Corellian trilogy. And she's in here too, and it's a lot of fun to see her back. Also, Bosk is apparently kicking still. Bosk must be super old too at this point. I mean, I don't know how long reptiles live for, but the last time he had any significance was in the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy. I haven't heard anything about him since. At all, I don't think. Maybe in a short story that I missed. I don't know. But he hasn't mattered in any book beyond that. So... But he's still kicking. He's still around. He can still upset Chewie by being racist to Wookiees, which makes sense for a Trandoshan because they hate Wookiees. But yeah, that pisses off Han. So, That was cool. Another thing to notice, Verget is experimented on. I kind of forgot this. I knew that she spent, forever long with the Vong, but I forgot the fact that she was experimented on. Just gotta remember, this is a Jedi of the Old Republic, runs away from the Sith, or from Palpatine, and then she gets captured by the Vong, spends 20 years with them, probably went in the embrace of pain, was experimented on, survived. I don't think she would be the same person after all of that. Yaddle wasn't even the same person after all that, but she at least got to see the Jedi after all that. Verget didn't. So, she also has tears that can heal people, kind of like in Harry Potter with the Phoenix. But, yeah, that's pretty much the only other thing I noticed with her to mention here. But yeah, it was an overall great book, and I do recommend it. Anyway, I'll see you in the next part, which is part 2, where we deal with the second half of the story by James Luceno. Until next time, may the Force be with you.